Hi there, it's Robert, the Red Tie Guy, and for today's Terms, Tech, and Tips Tuesday, we are going over seller carry. And no, it is not the same as a rent to own. So, we'll be going over what is seller carry, how is it different than traditional typical financing, why is it rare, and when is it useful. But before we get into that, your favorite part, the disclaimer. This is general real estate advice and terms to help you be familiar with real estate and the way transactions might be done. This is not, however, legal advice, and especially when dealing with things such as a note on a deed or the terms of a loan, you need to consult with the real estate agent helping you in that transaction, or a lawyer, or the professional who represents your interest in preparing the deed. This is if you are doing a specific transaction on a specific home, remember that every deal is different and that this is not advice for your specific deal. So with that being said, what is seller carry? Seller carry is, rather than having a third-party lender, the buyer would pay the seller back, potentially with interest. The buyer owns the home, but is paying the seller to not foreclose on them on agreed upon monthly terms. And in order to understand this, you must understand how the typical real estate transaction concludes. At closing, in a typical real estate transaction, not the seller carry, but the typical financed purchase, the seller receives all of the money for the purchase at the time of closing. They receive the down payment, and then they receive from the lender the rest of the money that's being financed. And then the buyer is making monthly payments towards the lender and avoids being foreclosed by the lender. But the seller's then no longer involved after closing. That's the typical real estate transaction. Now, in a seller carry, what is happening instead is there is no lender. The seller is acting as the lender in this case. So with a seller carry, what is happening is the seller is saying, hey, make a down payment, typically a large one, and then we will finance the rest of it. You will be paying me back the rest of the money that you owe. You own the home, but I will foreclose on you if you do not make monthly payments for what you owe. And then we get into specifics of, well, what are the interest on this? How will you pay it? Do we need a third party to record the payments and to keep track, etc. Now, why is this rare? The honest answer is, if you asked anyone whether they would want the money now or want the money over an extended period of time, most of them would want all of the money now. They have things that they want to spend it on or invest it in. Mortgage lending is typically a very low interest rate, but stable, over a very long period of time. And that's because they pool very large amounts of money and do typical sales with it. But if most sellers, by far and large, all want their money almost immediately, and they want all of it. Therefore, when a seller carry is actually happening, it's usually for a relatively short period of time, maybe 6 months, a year, 5 years, or 10 years, which is very different than when we think of a 30-year mortgage. And the interest rates are usually larger, and because of the hassle that would be involved in possibly foreclosing if payments not received, and agent commissions, the seller is expecting a rather sizable down payment up front to cover their losses just in case the buyer never makes a payment. So with that being said, when would it be used? When is it potentially a good idea and not something where you'd be better off seeking traditional financing? And the answer there is typically going to be land deals. Land is a lot smaller. You can build on it and potentially refinance after the project has been built. You could potentially sell it after you have built upon it. And so land, and being a smaller amount and not usually financed by banks, is something that the seller may say, hey, give me a sizable down payment, because otherwise only people I can go to is cash buyers. Another possibility would be investments, or also known as homes to be flipped. Someone might do a seller carry knowing that they're going to sell the home once they're done remodeling or fixing it up, and therefore they only need the debt to be carried for potentially up to 6 months. Make a sizable down payment, and then you have the rest of your money that would have otherwise been spent on purchasing it. You use that money to fix it up, potentially flip the home, and then you pay back this note in 6 months or a year after the home's been remodeled and it sells again. But a word of caution, anytime you're entering this type of one-on-one investment or one-on-one kind of lending, you need to be very careful about the terms. You might not be having the same protections that you have with traditional mortgages that are heavily regulated by the federal government. Instead, it's whatever terms are between you as the buyer or seller and the other party that you are dealing with. And that could be very lopsided to one or the other. This type of financing typically involves someone who is very savvy and very certain about what is going on and what they are doing. And if you feel you are not someone who is savvy and very knowledgeable about real estate, then I definitely urge a fair amount of caution. In fact, more than a fair amount of caution on your part, to make sure that there's not unfavorable terms that you might regret in the future. If you are entering into a seller carry, ask yourself, do you believe that you would ever miss a payment or potentially move, and that the terms would prohibit you from being able to do so? But if you do have that freedom, in this case where you own the home, you have options of selling it or refinancing it in the future, is this actually beneficial, and opens up a possibility that traditional financing might not? Just some things to consider, but keep those in mind, and as always, consult a real estate professional in each and every one of your transactions, and yours truly would be more than happy to help you. So feel free to give me a call. Let me know what you think of seller carry, and if there's any real estate terms or technology that you would like me to cover in another video. Be sure to comment below, subscribe, and definitely like. And this is Robert Neely, the Red Tie Guy, and I look forward to hearing from y'all. Thank you.